Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Development Control and Regulatory Board, Thursday the 14th of December. Might I remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council website and will also be available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Right, if we start on with item number 1 then, which is the minutes of the minutes meeting on the 16th of November 2017. Yeah. Is the seconder? All in favour? Looks to be unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 2 is question time. We've received no questions. Item number 3, questions asked by members. No members have asked any questions. To advise of any other item which the Chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda, I have nothing. Declarations of interest. Has anyone anything to declare at this time? I'll just go through this. It is noted that all members who are also members of a parish, town or district council or liaison committee will have personal interest in those applications which relate to the areas covered by those authorities. I would like to declare an interest, after what I've just said there, I would like to declare a personal interest leading to bias on item number 7. When we come to item number 7, I will leave the chair and go out, and Ewan will ask for nominations for someone to take the chair whilst I'm out of the room. When that item is over, the person who ever sits here will vacate this chair and I will sit back in it. Okay. Item number 6 is presentation of petitions under standing orders. We have no petitions. So that brings us on to item number 7, which I will now vacate the chair for. Thank you.
Yeah, so just so that everybody's clear, the Chairman, Mr Coxon, has declared a personal interest leading to bias in item number 7. So we need a chair for item number 7. The Deputy Chair, Mr Gillard, has given his apologies for this meeting, so we will need to elect a chair for this item only. Do we have any nominations?
Yes, I'd like to move that Councillor Jennings takes the chair for agenda item 7.
Could I second that? Thank you.
Do we have any other nominations? Okay, so we all agreed that Mr Jennings takes the chair? Okay, over to you, Mr Jennings, for item number 7.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be back, if only for a guest appearance. And indeed, I was chairman of this committee, I think, for 11 years. But I've taught you all I know, so I'll move on a little bit. So we are dealing purely with agenda item 7. When that is completed, Mr Coxon will resume as chairman. So item 7, which is the proposed addition of a public footpath between South Street and Prior Park Road, Ashby de la Zouche. So who's going to present that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start. Just mention to members that this shows you the wonderful remit of the work this committee does. Last month, those of you who were present dealt with an extinguishment application in connection with a right-of-way. So this month you're dealing with an application to add a right-of-way to the Council's definitive map. I'm joined with my rights-of-way colleagues Edwin McMillan and Stephen Tipping on my left, who will be able to answer any technical questions. I will go through the report highlighting the legal issues that you need to consider. Paragraph 1 then on page 9 sets out the purpose of this report and alerts you to the fact that an application has been received by the County Council from a Mr Harry Stewart of Pennon Way, Ashby-de-la-Zouch, to add a public footpath to the definitive map in Ashby-de-la-Zouch. And on the plan that you see on the visuals, I'll ask Stephen just to show you the line of the path to be added. It starts at A, goes down to B, along to C, and you can see there's also the existing footpaths in the locality shown by the crenellated lines. The recommendation to you is that if you are satisfied with the report, the evidence that the report deals with it, that you should approve this path being added to the definitive map. The background to the report then on page 10 refers to the fact that, as I say, Mr Stewart has applied for what we call a modification order, and a copy of his application can be found at Appendix B, which is on page 23. These applications come to the County Council's attention normally because of some actions being done that stops use of the path or something like that, and it explains in paragraph 5 rather. It was triggered by works being undertaken to secure the playing field by the way of putting a lock on the entrance gate and installing fencing on Prior Park Road. And Mr Stewart, when he made his application, supplied photographs showing this, which are on Appendix C, page 25. The owner of the playing field at the time was the County Council. Paragraph 9 and 8 rather, and 9 indicate to you the preliminary work that was undertaken. And the key issue that the report comes to, which is highlighted at paragraph 12, is the brought into question date. That links to the 20-year requirement to show user, and as the report explains further on, the officer view of this brought into question date was that it was in 2009, which is some way ago. Part C of the report, headed Legal Considerations, deals with the statutory provisions under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 and the Highways Act 1980. They're set out in your report, so I won't go through them, but I will be happy to take any questions on them. But I would ask you to take heed, please, when you look at paragraph 18 on page 12, to the test that you have to apply your mind to in deciding whether or not to make the recommendations. And because of the nature of the legal provisions and issues of dealing with evidence and memory, our recommendation is that the board should apply Test B, which is the lower standard of proof on the balance of probability. An important issue when you're dealing with rights of way is to deal with any aspect of behaviour by the landowner that seeks to say that there is not a right of way in question, and that's covered by the Highways Act 1980, section 31. That's set out in paragraph 21, which also deals with the length of user right that has to be shown, which is the 20 years, which you can see there in subsection 1 of the section at the bottom of page 12. I mentioned a few moments ago what the landowner needs to do to try and stop any right-of-way being created, and that's given more detail in terms of the lay approach, paragraphs 22 to 25. And you'll hear further as you go through the report that there's been no evidence of the landowner seeking to try and stop this right-of-way being created. Part D of the report, starting on page 14 then, is the evidence that officers in Environment and Transport in the Rights of Way section would have considered. Unfortunately, with reports like this that have quite a long gestation, there are a number of minor typographical errors, I beg your pardon, with regard to the paragraph details, which I'll correct as I now take you to paragraph 28. So it's not paragraphs 26 to 31, it's 29 to 33. It's not paragraphs 39 to 56, it's 34 to 60. And it's not paragraphs 58 to 60, it's 61 to 62. One of the things officers undertake is they do a site survey, and the details then are given at paragraphs 29 to 33. I want to stop there and just ask my colleagues to just take you through now the photographs that are on the screen. So the first
first photograph here is at point A on the plan, and this is from South Street, looking south. And you'll see that the path at this point also forms the access to Ashby Castle. And there's a notice board giving details of admission prices and so on the right there. And also there's a tennis club to the right along as well. And the second photograph is south of point A, beside the tennis club, but looking north, back to South Street. So you can see some users of the track with dogs. This is between point A and B, looking south, and there's a small disabled car park for visitors to the Ashby Castle to park in, which is here. So cars drive down to this point, but not really any further. This is south of the small car park beside Ashby Castle, looking south towards point B. On the left is Ashby Castle, and on the right there's a memorial playing field owned by a trust. And this is a view of point B, from just inside the playing field, looking in a easterly direction. So there's an access gate which you can see is open. And this is the same point looking in the opposite direction, westerly, towards Prior Park Road, across the playing field that at one time was owned by the County Council and leased to Ashby School. And this is the gate out onto Prior Park Road. And so there is obviously a vehicular access here as well. And then you can see that there's some railings at the side which have been put in at one point to try and secure the playing field. And you can see that those have been knocked out. So there's a gap for people to squeeze under or let their dogs through. From time to time the gate has been locked, but I don't think that on the date of my site survey that it was locked, as I remember. And that's the tour through the path.
And I'd highlight members from those photographs, as well as the ones in your pack. You can see evidence that obviously people have walked on foot. For example, there you can see the evidence of the mud as opposed to the grass. Officers are obliged to also look at any historical documentation they may hold, and at paragraph 34 and onwards, there's reference to the documentation that has been considered, but it's right to say that those documents don't really add anything in terms of evidence as to whether there was a path shown on any of the maps referred to at the particular time. And also the aerial photographs, we mentioned at paragraph 38, also don't show any discernible line. But I should also add, although they don't show anything, that's not conclusive. I'm asking you to consider, as the report does, the evidence in its totality, but it is right to put before you any evidence that perhaps is not as strong or as high as it might be. But at paragraph 40, the officer view overall conclusion is that certainly there's no evidence of it being in existence in the first definitive map in 1952, and that the path came into use at some point between 1952 and the first report of use in 1974, which means then the evidence is more or less a matter for the user evidence, which I then come to in paragraph 41 onwards in the report. And if I could just ask Stephen to just go back to that. That's right. So this is what we call a user evidence summary table, which is at page 47 of your report at Appendix E, and it shows the two black lines starting with the line in 2009 and the one in 1990, the reason being that we're discounting the period after 2009 for the reasons given earlier. So what Mr Stewart did in conjunction with County Council officers was complete what we call user evidence questionnaires, which were then considered. And those questionnaires also require provision of a plan for people to indicate the rough route of their walking. And then from paragraph 41 right the way through to 59 is a summary of the various forms received. I would in particular highlight the fact that we have, I think, 7 users, if I'm right, Ed, can say, if you look, sorry, 9, paragraph 60 on page 18, that they've used the path for the whole of the period 1990 to 2009. So I mentioned earlier what can a landowner do to try and rebut any presumption, and that's dealt with in paragraph 61, indicated that the county council were the owners of the land in question. They have said that they have tried to secure the evidence to secure the playing field against 2009, which is the date that we're working back from. But the other landowners who we weren't able to identify because it's not registered ownership, so that was resulted from a site notice. No objections were received. Consultation has also been carried out with the utility companies who have no objection, and the conclusions at paragraph 64 to 66 are that on the basis of the evidence, the recommendation is that the order should be made, this path be added to the definitive map. So I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman, on any legal points arising. My rights away colleagues will deal with any questions on either the user evidence or the factual matters covered in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Can I congratulate all the officers in the report that's before us this afternoon? It's very clear and concise, and I find the photographs not only good quality but very beneficial for anybody who doesn't know the area quite so well. My thanks to you all. Now it's open to members. Does any member wish to make a comment, ask a question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Do we know, or have I misunderstood, the ownership of the pathway from A to B is entitled? So that's starting in South Street, walking towards the castle on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is the tennis club. Do we understand the ownership in that particular path?
Well, through you, Chairman, partly it was county council ownership, but now it's been sold to the parish council. The other town council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other ownership is unknown.
Yes, Mr. Bolter.
Very formal this afternoon.
It's nearly Christmas.
If you go back to the photographs, the one that showed the disabled parking sign, just that one, yeah, shows clear evidence to me that's been used by vehicles, straight on. Well, you won't wear grass away like that by walking, and it's the tyre track size, so vehicles have been using that for some purpose. What does it actually lead to down there?
Well, if you follow it right down, there's obviously the playing field, which we saw in the photo, which you can then access from either end, either Prior Park Road or South Street. There's also 1 or 2 gates into adjoining properties. So, and one gentleman did get in touch and claim that he actually lives on Prior Park Road. His property is on Prior Park Road, and he says that he has a vehicular access to the rear of his property via this track that he's accustomed to using, and he has a gate in. So we accept that. We don't have any quarrel with that. It doesn't look as though he uses it particularly often. I mean, further down here, I mean, you could take a vehicle down there and you can just see the track in the distance there. It doesn't look like it's used regularly, but it's also possible, I think, that I think there's an access into the Ashby Castle just a few yards on down the track in that picture, which might be where those particular wheelings are leading to. So perhaps for maintenance of the castle site, I think there might be more regular traffic for the first 10 or 20 yards there. That would be my guess. But because none of this is registered at the land registry, and we've consulted with all the adjoining landowners, nobody's come forward to say they own it. So ownership of this part of the track is unknown as far as we're concerned, and therefore we can't find anybody to tell us who might legally have access along the track. We're just inferring who is actually using it.
The reason I raise it, Chair, the bushes looked nicely clipped to me, not left to go wild. So not only have you got the track there, you've got the bushes that have been cut back to allow vehicular access down there. And the other photographs clearly show a path that's been used for quite a few years by various people, because the grass is worn away all the way through. If it wasn't used regularly, then the grass would grow back, but the grass has not grown back, so there's evidence that it's being used on a regular basis, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Can I ask a question before I throw it open again? Am I right in thinking that if members are to approve an order this afternoon, it has to be advertised, and if there's an objection, then there has to be an inquiry, so anybody can come forward and still, at a late stage, say they own it?
Well, through you, Chairman, yes, the process, there's a statutory process. This is currently how modifications are dealt with. There's a committee level, a board level decision on matters like this type of matter, because it's important that it goes to members rather than dealt with as a delegated matter, although there may be a straightforward matter that can be taken on delegated powers. But for something like this, it's right to bring it to members' attention for your decision. If your decision is to approve the recommendation, it will be advertised. Then, of course, if there is any objection, then the next stage of the statutory process is that the matter goes to the Secretary of State, who then arranges through the planning inspectorate either for a public inquiry to be held, a bit like a planning situation, or if not a public inquiry, the matter be considered by what we call written representations. So this is not necessarily the end of the process. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, please, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a few little questions. Do you want me to ask them all together? First one on page 11, just to confirm who actually owns the playing field now. It does say under point 5 that Leicestershire County Council owned it, so do we know who actually owns the playing field now? Is my first question. The second one is on the same page under 11, that there was evidence of antisocial behaviour resulting from the public access to the playing field. Have we got any evidence that that is still continuing at all? And then also on page 13 under point 23, if you could just explain that a little bit more to me, because by locking the gate, surely the landowner was producing evidence that they didn't want people to access that land. So if you could just explain that a little bit more for me, please.
I'll speak up a bit because I'm a little bit far away. Oh, it's getting closer. Good. Yeah, just to confirm that the land in question, the field at that particular end, was purchased by the town council from the county council, and is now in their ownership. Secondly, the reason why that 2009 date was so important was that was when it was first raised about antisocial behaviour in terms of the playing field as a whole. And the county council at that stage did seek to restrict access to the site. And I don't think there's been any claim that, and there have been efforts to keep that gate and the fencing in place during that time, but they've certainly been removed in part during that period. Now, despite the route being used frequently by normal people, passing and repassing, we haven't considered any of that as legitimate use, because it's considered that the county council as a landowner was making it clear we did not think this was a public right-of-way, and we were fencing across accordingly. Sorry, what was the last point?
Just on, through you, Chair, page 13 was point 23, which you sort of just touched on there, that yes, you did try and stop people accessing the land.
Yeah, in terms of this and the wider issue, I think it might be useful to members. Try and imagine this process of what's known as deemed dedication, either people passing and repassing on a defined path, and they feel they're doing it because they have every right to do it. Nobody's going to challenge them. And there are a number of ways of defeating that, shall we say. There is obviously putting up signs saying this is not a public right-of-way, and you will have seen them at various places. I think one example used, but this morning, was that the pub car park sign, just saying the throughput isn't that. There's physically challenging people on site, just saying, look, sorry, this isn't a public right-of-way, could you turn around and go? But Also, there is just that physical act of stopping people moving along a route by obstructing it, or blocking it. I shouldn't use the word obstruction. And by blocking it, that immediately stops the clock. You know, you have said to people, this isn't public right of way. If you're coming down here, you must know because I've actually blocked this off. And really, that is why we're going back to that 2009 date. Now, prior to that, despite some research on our part and being able to ask internally as well, in terms of the field and other areas, we couldn't find any evidence that any signs have been put up or any other obstructions have been put in place during that pre-20-year period, and indeed during the whole period of any of the witness statements that you've seen before you.
So just one more point, Chair, through you. So the Town Council don't have any objections with that having right of way through their playing field then?
What I can say is that we've carried out preliminary consultations on this proposal, and there haven't been any formal objections to the proposals raised. Should members agree that an order should be made, it's then open to people to submit any objections should they choose to do so.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. I think it's fair to say that consultation has taken place and there have been no objections to date. But if it does proceed and go to a public inquiry, then something may happen. I don't know. Anybody else got any points? Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Ashby Town Council, they've obviously want this for a reason. If it's a field and be used as a sports field or whatever in the future, it's going to have a pathway through the middle of it. Would this be the sort of time where you define it to the edge of the field instead of going all the way through? I just feel as though it obstructs the use of the field for in the future, but that might be something for Ashby Town Council to do.
Yeah, just under current legislation, there is talk of changes to the current legislation at the moment. Under current legislation, the authority needs to determine whether a highway has come into existence on a particular line. Should a highway have come into existence, should we record it as highway, then there's nothing to stop anyone who might be a landowner and wishes to do whatever they want with the land they own to approach us and seek to have the route diverted. I don't see a problem with that.
Any further point from any member? No? Well, in that case, can I propose the officer's recommendation that the order is made? Yes. Second. Did you want to...
I'll move.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well done.
Oh, okay, we'll take a vote then, please. All in favour, show. That is unanimous. If you can't spell unanimous, I'll vote against it. Okay, well, that is my little bit done, so we will have John back in, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you, David, for taking the chair while I was absent. Moving on then to agenda item number 8, which is an application at Mountsorrel Quarry, land off Salby Road, Barrow-on-Soar. Lonick, I believe you're dealing with that. Could you...
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief introduction for you. Yes, this is a proposal to install a ballast rinsing plant on the route of an existing conveyor belt which runs from the existing quarry across land to a railhead there, and the proposed area for the washing plant is alongside the conveyor belt in this location. Here on the aerial photograph you can see it's in this area of land which is currently used partly for stocking of some material, and the conveyor runs along here past the marina development here. The proposal is to put a dogleg in on a conveyor. The conveyor goes this way to divert material into a washing plant where it's washed, and then the silt is collected, and the silt will be taken off-site along this track down to Salby Lane and away to another quarry, probably Brooksbury Quarry, which is in the ownership of Tarmac. Now, the reason for this proposal coming forward, it is customer-led in that it's a demand mainly from Network Rail, who want ballast of a certain quality, and what happens, the material, it gets very fine material in it, and that fine material needs to be washed out before it gets to the railhead and then goes on to market. So that's really the reason for putting this proposal in. It is washed at the quarry, but it's quite a long conveyor, and it does get silted up for some reason before it gets to the railhead. So that's the main reason for it. The kit that they're going to put in is a washing plant and a plant to collect the silt once it's dried out and taken off-site. There has been a number of assessments made in terms of the impact on this proposal, and you can see from this, there's a red line here where they're going to put an acoustic fence which will be on top of an existing soil mound. The existing soil mound is around about 3.5 metres high with thick vegetation already in place, but this acoustic fencing will add a bit more of a barrier to the noise levels that might be emanating from this, and subject to that, that should control the noise level to a satisfactory level. And additionally, there's issues around flooding around here, and there's a proposal to put a flood attenuation measures in here, a pond, so it'll make sure that the area is controlled in terms of the flooding. Now you will have, oh no, sorry, not on this one. Just is that the last one? Yeah, sorry. And that, Chairman, is all I have to say. The recommendation is for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the recommendations. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you for that introduction. Local members, Mrs. Fryer or Mr. Osborne, is there anything from them, Ewan? No. We have no speakers on this item. I open it to the meeting. There is a recommendation on page 58. So, is there any on the... Mr. Crooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 52, it's an observation that I made this morning where it talks about the height of the tallest part of the building being 13.75 metres, which is 45 feet in the old money. And it says somewhere else about it being slightly screened by hedges and that, but something that high is not going to be screened at all, but it's not affecting anybody, so I haven't got a problem with it, Chairman.
Okay, Molly. Mrs. Taylor.
Just a couple of points. Just on page 52 under 10, you just did touch on the noise level, but it is sort of till quite late in the evening, whether that's going to cause an issue or anything. If you can just give some clarity on that. And also on page 57 on 29, there's a date there of the 19th of December 2015. Should that be 2017? Is that a typo? 29 on page 57.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think that date must be wrong because it must have been 2017. Thank you for pointing that out. The noise assessment has been carried out. It's been looked at by the Environmental Health officer. They're happy with it, even with the timing of the operations. I think the noise levels that they've set shouldn't exceed 55, but from recollection, the noise prediction was around about 53, so it will be below that limit, so there is scope for it to make sure it is within the limits.
Thank you, Chair. The words on the presentation were used were might and should when it came to noise attenuation. And I don't like those might and should words. What if it doesn't? Is there any... Come back, you've got a marina there and it's residential. A lot of people live there, I understand. You're in a marina because it's... because you're communing with nature as part of it there. The building, the height of the building there, and the fact that they're just, you say heavy vegetation, but none of them are trees. I would be happier, I think, if trees were planted there that would, mature trees in the future, screen that building from the marina. I know that noise travels and it hits the first hard surface it comes to and will reverberate. And you're talking about a noise that's going to be constant. And 55, I believe, is quite high, having it as a drone there all the time. So what safeguards has the marina got against this?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There are trees there, as well as other vegetation. There's quite a few mature trees along there. One of the conditions we have on here is to make sure that all those trees and vegetations are retained, and that's condition 17. The other safeguards we've put in, and suppose going back a bit, the reasons why I say should, because any noise element, you can put a number on it, but people are... perceive noise in different ways, so there will be perceptions of how people receive it, but the only technical way of actually addressing it is to measure in a number, and 55 is the accepted standard for noise levels. And as I said, I think the predictions were actually 53, and the condition here says it shan't exceed that 53 level. It doesn't specifically say it, but it points to a document where that 53 is. There are also conditions that says when you construct the plant, you should use material which has a certain noise reduction quality, and that will have to be satisfied with us as a detailed submission. And thirdly, within a month of the ballast plant coming into operation, they'll do some more monitoring to test whether all this has worked in terms of the acoustic fencing and the ballast. And if they're not complying, then they're going to have to do something about it to make sure they get it to it. So those are the safeguards that we've put in. I think that's about as best as we can do, Chairman.
Can I just come back on that? I know when I started on planning in Charnwood and they were talking about these acoustic fences, that I thought some scientific thing had been invented, and I was quite excited about it. But I realised all it is just a tall fence. And there's nothing there, and it still, allows a certain amount of noise to go over it unless it's extremely high. So I'm pleased to hear that there is going to be other insulation, not insulation, but that similar thing. Thank you very much.
I haven't got a proposition at the moment. Is anyone likely to...
I'll move the recommendation.
Second, Chairman.
Okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded. Any all in favour? Could you please indicate? Right. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 9, then, is a planning application from Leicestershire County Council. Lonnie, would you speak to this? report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Rather unusually, you're getting a proposal for a industrial development, but done under what's called Regulation 3 of the Town and Country Planning Regulations. And those of you who've been on the training will know very well what Regulation 3 means. It means things that the County Council can determine themselves which aren't county matters. So in other words, minerals and waste are county matters done by private applicants. Regulation 3 applications are matters which the County Council wants to develop themselves on their own land, and that's why schools and the like are Regulation 3s. Unusually, this is a Regulation 3 application, even though it's for a commercial type of development. And the reason why it's categorised as a Regulation 3 under the regulations is the County Council own the land, and the County Council will be building the building, and thereafter will be leasing it out to a tenant as part of its function. So that's why it's a Regulation 3, and you'll see from the report that although we've done these in the past, it's been quite a while since this committee has dealt with a proposal of this sort under these regulations. And we have taken Council's opinion just to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and the answers come back as, yes, you are doing the right thing. In fact, if it is a Regulation 3, which this is, the regulations say that you shall determine it. It's not allowed to be done by anybody else. So that's just the background for you. So on that basis, we treat this application as we do any other application, and we determine it in the same way as we would any other application. So this proposal here is to the south of Lutterworth, and you'll see from the report that it already has got outline planning permission, and the outline planning permission extends over the red and the blue lines as shown on that photograph. And that was granted by Harbour District Council. And then just so I don't confuse you too much, the reason why it was granted by Harbour District Council was that when the County Council first wanted to do this, it was intending to grant permission, get permission, and then sell the land on to another developer. In the meantime, I think it's changed the way it's going to approach its asset management, and this might be the first of a number of applications coming forward before you, is that the County Council now want to retain the land, build the building, and lease it to a suitable tenant. So on the back of the outline application, because we have to determine it, it's come back in as a full application and not a reserve matter on the outline. So we are determining this red line boundary now for the first phase of this part of proposals to develop this site for industrial purposes. So the proposal here that we have is to build on this red line. As I said, just to the south of Lutterworth already has outline planning consent. The proposal here is the first part. There'll be a building here with car parking, access coming in off the road along there, and allied to this development there'll be some landscaping features and attenuation ponds to cover drainage and potential flooding issues. So that's the proposal before you. The more detailed measures in terms of this is shown in this plan. I'm sorry you can't read the writing, but it really describes the sort of landscaping pattern and footways. But the main purpose is to provide an attenuation pond to ensure adequate drainage. The design of the building is a modern design, quite a good design in my opinion. It's got these curved edges. It's got a feel of sort of Art Deco about it, but it's a very good design. And you'll see from the report in terms of the policy that it has got outline planning consent, and it is an area where the local plan is looking to develop Lutterworth as an employment area. You will have a supplementary report with you. I know it's only circulated this morning, but this really covers a couple of late responses from consultees. One is from the County Highway Authority and the other from the Environment Agency. They didn't come in time to be published in the main report, but hence the supplementary report, and I'll just help members explain what the County Highway Authority is saying. In terms of its original observations on the outline application, it didn't have an issue with it, no objection, subject to some conditions, and equally on this detailed application, again, raises no objections, but does request a number of conditions, one around the access details, cycle parking, motorcycle parking, and also construction and traffic management plan to be submitted as well. They did include a request for a routing agreement for the construction traffic, but you'll notice from the condition that's not included because certainly as a planning judgment we didn't think a routing agreement for construction traffic wasn't suitable considering where it is. But nevertheless, there is a management plan, and if needs be, it can be picked up in that condition. It also asks for some travel packs to be supplied as part of the requirement for sustainable transport. As far as the Environment Agency is concerned, they initially raised an objection. I think they had some concern about the flood risk assessment. I don't think they were quite cited on what was submitted. That was pointed out to them. They have now looked at it and they don't have an objection, providing that the development is built in accordance with the plan. It's not on a high-risk flood zone. There is a high-risk flood area close by, but it doesn't affect the footprint of where this building is going. Hence their suggestion, the condition that it should be built out in the way that it's proposed. So there is a change to the recommendation, Chairman. It's still a permission, but given that there's a requirement for travel packs, which requires funding and money to be spent, there is a requirement to enter into a planning obligation as well as the conditions, and these conditions in the supplementary report, Chairman. And I have actually heard from the local member, Mrs. Page, who supports the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sorry, what did you say about Mrs. Page?
Mrs. Page supports the proposal.
I thought I'd heard you right, but Anthony, you wanted to speak.
Well, only briefly, Chairman. Again, as I said at the outset, this is a committee of first, so this is the first time you've had this type of Regulation 3 application before you, and it's really important for me just to remind you back from your training that just because it's a county council application doesn't mean that you treat it any differently from any other type of application that comes before you, and that you don't need to give it any special treatment because it's a county council application. Just consider it on its planning merits as identified in the report and the supplementary report and the presentation you've heard from Lonick. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Crooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed from the drawing that we've got that to the north we've got houses across Coventry Road, and to the south we've got some houses very adjacent to the site, and there are a comment about concerns about this drainage lagoon. Is the site able to be secured out of hours to prevent youngsters getting on the site? And because they're always attracted to water, and I just thought that this, you know, if there is a fence around the place and it can be locked off, then the people have done what they can, you know. Otherwise, it's wide open.
Chairman, if I may, I'm not sure what the final arrangements will be, but it'll be up to the County Council as landowner and the tenant to make sure that that site is secure in the future. So it'll be a site management issue, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Excuse my ignorance, but there's a phrase here I've never heard of before, an attenuation basin. What is that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's a pond, basically.
It's not for a Christmas pudding.
No, Chairman. It's as shown on the plan that I've got up there. It's really they call it a basin, but it's really a pond where water can collect. And what that does really is, rather than the water flowing off and flooding into these streams, it collects there, and there's a more managed flow out. So it regulates the amount of flow coming out of the site.
Thank you. I think I've heard of it, but not under that expression, under that title. Thank you.
Mr. Bolter.
Yes, Chair. These always cause a problem. When the development's complete, who's going to have ownership of that balancing pond? Will it be transferred to the new owners, or the new tenant of the factories, or will it be retained by the county council for work, or will it be Severn Trent? These things always cause a lot of problem. And Severn Trent sort of back them off to the county, and the county backs them off to the tenant. In the end, very little ever gets done. So that needs to be settled so we all know what we're talking about before we go too far. And also, we've got the design of the building. What colour is it going to be? I'd say it's an Art Deco look, which I'm fully in favour of. But is it going to be just pure white, or is it going to have any colour on it? And if so, what the colour is going to be? Will it be toned down, or will it be bright colours, or you just need a few details. Just to give a design like that, just as a plain drawing, to me is not adequate for us to make a decision on. As there's houses both sides of it.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the land ownership will be retained within the county council, and the county council will lease it out to a tenant. What arrangements we make between the tenant and the county council, I'm not party to, but there are requirements on the planning condition for those to be put in place, and whoever the landowner is, that obligation will be on them. In terms of the building is shown in terms of the design there. The exact details of the material are subject to a detailed planning consent, so the exact materials will have to be agreed at a future date, Chairman. But it'll be as per condition number 3, that is a requirement that those are.
You're asking us this afternoon to agree to a building. We don't know what it's going to look like when it's finished. You've got houses both sides of it.
Should be a planning application.
I'd have thought.
Back.
Yes, yeah, so coming back to us, I'd have thought.
That is the design of the building. That's how the building will look. How it's actually finished in terms of the materials. It says so there. There are some details and materials, but there may be some final tweaks on that. So what we want to be satisfied is that it's going to be in the way that it's being proposed, and it's going to be a suitable materials. Yeah, I can't read it from here, Chairman, but I can go up and read it to members if you wish.
Are you, Monica, are you saying that the specification will have to come back to this committee, or come back to a delegated situation?
It is. It's a decision of the County Planning Authority, so it is you, but there are delegated powers to deal with certain things, and this may be one that will be delegated, but those are the specifications that are currently before you, but there will be details coming forward. I'm hoping to firm up what they've indicated here. Now, if they come back with something radically different, then we may take a view and say, look, this is not what you said originally. It's not what members saw. We may have to come back and tell you about it. But I'm pretty sure that if this is what they're designing and they've spent time and trouble doing it and specifying the materials there and the colours, then I would suspect that they would want to make sure that, well, I would anticipate that the submission will be along the lines as submitted. That's what I want to, what we normally say, show me a sample of the brick or the tile that you're going to use. It's okay saying on a drawing, but normally what planning authorities want to do, want to see a sample, and that's really what the safeguard is, really. So if they come with a red tile, I say, you didn't say red, you said white, so those are the checks.
Yeah. I think that's pretty normal, really, for materials to come back after the permission has been given. I think it's quite pleasing to the eye, really. But
yeah.
Mr. Wolf.
I don't know whether it's my eyes, Chair, but there seems to be something over the windows. Is it a canopy or something over the windows? They're not straightforward windows. There seems to be something over them, like it's a covering over the windows.
Aluminium capping. Item 3.
So you've not got windows, you've got something over the windows.
Chairman, depends if members have a problem with that. I mean, that's what I want to really sort of get to is if that's the sort of principle of the design and the details as far as they know at this stage. I can't see whether those windows are just shown open or I don't think there are canopies on there.
Mr. Crooks, you wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've also got concerns. This is more like an outline impression with an artist's impression of what they're going to build. There's no details of how high the building's going to be, how long it's going to be, or how many rooms or anything. This normally should come back as a proper design brief.
Sorry, Chairman. There are other plans that have been submitted in terms of the internal layout. I haven't shown those for you, Chairman. I wasn't sure how detailed members wanted to go because the internal layout is not that important. What is important is how the building rests in the landscape. This is a land use planning role that you have, and you need to decide whether that scale and mass and design of building is suitable in the landscape on this site.
Done.
Thank you, Chairman. My interpretation is it's good. It's quite different, a nice approach, nice clean cut, and if it is a sort of whitey grey, that's used quite regular now because it helps with the outline in the distance. So I think it's a very good looking building. I don't have any nervous worries. It looks like there is like a blind or a canopy coming out over the windows, but I don't think that's going to cause massive problems. And I'm just happy it looks good. The outline is nice on it. The style of it is good and appropriate, and I'd have thought that would have attracted a favourable tenant. And I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, if I may, Chairman. Thank you.
Anthony, you wanted to say something else, did you?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think Lonick has explained to you the key issue that you have to decide, and also the safeguards that are in existence with regard to what will be approved in terms of when it comes back to planning officers in terms of the actual nitty-gritty of the detail. So I want you to be reassured that what is built will bear quite a strong similarity to what you see in front of you, because if it doesn't, then Lonick won't approve it and it would come back, and that's understood. But I also would just mention, I'm thinking back, it's a little while ago now, to my district council experience in terms of planning applications, and we were very lucky just to get a plan of the location in terms of what was being approved. In terms of the detail, now things may have moved on, but when I came to look at the report, I was quite satisfied in the visuals that you had enough before you to make an informed decision with regard to whether you felt this was the right sort of development to approve at this location. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Anthony. I think you're right. We are, if we're not careful, getting too bogged down with detail. I think what we need to do is to be looking at an idea of what's likely to be built. Mrs. Seaton.
I slightly disagree. I think we should be bogged down with details to a certain degree. We're being asked to look at this. Now, this looks to me as if it's metal box. The metal box comes to mind. I like it. I like the design. I think it's smashing. It's going to have an acrylic render and it's going to be white. I don't know what it's going to look like in the landscape, though, because I haven't seen what it faces it. I know there's housing there, but I would like to have seen the housing. I would have liked to have seen how close it's going to be. Is that an extremely wide road, or just a busy road? Unfortunately, I'm not aware of the area. I would like to see how it looked in the landscape, but it's not going to face on, is it, to the houses opposite? It's going to side on. I would also the balancing pond, the sud that's there has got. If you could go to the picture of that, please. That's it. That is obviously for recreational use because it's got footpaths there as well. So I don't know how it's going to be secured. Is it there for the greater enjoyment of the people around it, or just the office workers there? And I don't know whether those are the sort of things I should be asking or bothering about. It has definitely got some sort of canopy on there. It doesn't. It says a aluminium topper. I'm hoping that it won't be a canopy that's red, white, and blue, and there's a lot of detail that's not there that I would have liked to have been there. And I'm going to stop there because I'm worried about the management there of that place. And there is sort of obviously a lot of features that are attracting people in. Is it there just for that office worker, the office workers there? In that case, is it them that's going to manage the building, the area?
Monica, are you able to help with any of those?
I can help with some of them, but not with all of them. I haven't any information about whether this will be public access or not. I suspect that this is going to be closely associated with this development because this will be part of the mitigation in order to get this done. So I suspect it'll be part of that. In terms of the location, there is going to be landscaping here to form a barrier between this, which is a showman travellers site, and this is a very major road, and there is quite a lot of distance between that and his housing. So in terms of the impact, I think it is very well screened, it's well designed, and I don't think there are any sound reasons to object to it, Chairman, for what I've heard this afternoon. Thank you, Chairman.
Go on, man.
Thank you. There looks as though there's a vehicular access. Going back to the plan again, please. That one. Where will that vehicular access go to? Yes. So is that part of... Looks as though you can drive through it, drive along it?
Chairman, if I go back here, there is remember there's an outline planning permission to develop all of this site for industrial development. So that's already been granted. This is phase one. The rest of the site will be developed in due course, and that access road is going into there. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. On page 77, under the consultations, nothing's been received from Harbour District Council or Lutterworth Town Council. Have we had anything come in since the report's been put forward?
No, Chairman.
And just a point also on page 80 under 59, the noise and air quality. It is proposing this is going to be a 24-hour office that's going to operate 24 hours. So obviously there is an issue with maybe traffic and noise with how close it is to residential properties and the showground. And just also there was comments on the plan of external lighting. So is that going to affect either the road or how close it is to the showman? Because obviously if there's cars coming in 24 hours a day, there's going to be headlights plus external lighting. So is there anything to control where that light's shining, how bright it is?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there has been a full noise assessment done as part of that, which included the full use and timing of the proposal, and that's been looked at by the Environmental Health Officer. They're satisfied with that. In terms of the lighting, there is a condition which requires the detailed sighting, design, timing, luminance, all that sort of stuff. There's some details to be agreed on that to make sure that it's kept to a satisfactory level. Yeah. And that's condition 12 on page 86.
Thank you. Mr. Bolter.
In effort to help things along, Chair, none of us object to the, as far as I'm aware, object to the building. Some of the detail we're concerned about. If it was to come back to us with the final information, I think we could perhaps all vote for it. But until we've had an agreement, I can't vote for something I can't see what it's going to look like. So that's my stance on it. Happy with the design. I want to see the final details before I sign it off. Without that, I won't vote for it.
Okay. Anthony, are you able to shed any light on
I think I've said all in terms of the legal position. There's really nothing further to add to what you've heard earlier. This is a matter of planning judgment in respect of a full planning application, details of which have been provided and which are summarised in the report. And the planning judgment in this particular application is that planning permission should be granted, with the safeguards that the conditions deal with any issues that are appropriate to be dealt with by conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Anthony. David.
I was just going to make the point, Chairman, that living where I do, we do our shopping in Lutterworth, although I don't represent the Lutterworth area. And the showman's quarters are winter quarters, and I think they're only abilited there in the winter months. And of course this, as we've been told, has already got outline planning consent and is going to be developed. And Lonica's advises that there are no reasons to refuse it. Sometimes we have applications we don't like, but there are quite simply no grounds to refuse them. And I will support the application.
Thank you, David. Bill.
Yes, David's proposing the application. I will second that, Jim. I'm sure if there have been any problems, we'd have heard that from Mrs Page or Lutterworth Town Council.
Indeed. The proposal came from Dan and was seconded by David. Bill, you're okay with that?
Mm-hmm. Done it.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're in a position to move to a vote. I think it's been round and around. So, all in favour, please, of. Okay. Yeah. Any against? Thank you. Oh, thank you very much for that. Agenda item number 10 is a school proposal. Earl Shilton. Lonick, I believe you're dealing with that one as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a proposal for a Heathfield Primary School, which is on the site of the former Heathfield Academy in Earl Shilton. The location is shown there on the plan for you. The aerial photograph shows the site as it exists. The main building, built around about 1939, is this block here. There's a swimming pool within the courtyard here. There was a Horsa building there and a later 1970 addition to the school. The proposal is to demolish this bit, the Horsa and the internal swimming pool, and refurbish the main 1930s building in order to locate Newlands Primary School, which is currently there, and looking for additional space to locate them into an expanded school. Oh, right. Apologies for that. So this is what the school looks like at the moment. Say it's a sort of 1930s style. It's not listed, but it is a heritage asset, a recognised heritage asset because of its age and design. And again, just some more photographs showing you the school with the frontage there and the access points. Again, different angles, just showing you the school along there, and also the zigzag lines on the existing site. The proposal here then, north is now that way. So we've got the building as existing in the 30s here. The swimming pool that was there has been taken out. There's going to be an additional extension in there to provide more classroom space. There'll be new pedestrian access and disabled access in through here and these points, and then there'll be refurbished and improved car parking arrangements, and with access for service vehicles in as well. So if I could just move on to the next slide. So the design you've seen, the photograph, it'll pretty much stay the same as it is. The current proposal is to paint it in one colour and keep the render on it. You'll see from the report there was at one point a desire to put timber, some timber at the top. That's now been not proposed, and it's going to be staying in its original form, rendered, painted, but maybe with the central element painted in a different colour, and it's shown in a sort of grey there with off-white paint on the other buildings. In terms of the landscaping, this shows the trees that need to come out to accommodate the development, and the trees that are staying in. So the dark green are the trees that are staying in. The outline trees are the ones that are coming out. Most of them are in pretty poor quality, but the proposal is to replant along the frontage, and this plan shows you the planting proposals. There'll be quite substantial planting at the back along here. The playing field will be left open, and there'll be some play areas at the back as well. This is a photograph which is just showing the pedestrian entrance, which I'll say a bit more about in a moment, and also the issue around the coloured film on the windows, which you would have gleaned from the report, again, which I'll come to shortly. There is a supplementary report as well in this, just to clarify a few things. If I go back to this photograph, you'll note from the report that there is a requirement that in order to accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists, this has to be widened. And the concerns from the applicant is that if this is a sort of, it's not listed, but it's a heritage asset, is this going to affect the setting of that building, and will it take away something from the heritage asset? And this covering report gives you some advice about that. The heritage officer says, well, it may affect it, but what you've got to balance is the safety and the reuse of that site in a proper way. So I think the advice is, yes, you can widen it, but let's widening it in a more sensitive way, and let's see the details of how you're going to do that. And hence, there's a recommendation here to add to an existing condition to ensure that the widening of that pedestrian access is subject to a detailed approval. The other representations, just for clarification, is just to clarify Earl Shilton Town Council's concerns, and they're set out in a supplementary paragraph 8. And also just to reflect on Mrs. Richards' comments, she doesn't object to it, but she has got some concern about the coloured window film, and since she's read the supplementary report, she's satisfied that her points have been put across. In terms of any additional representations, again, Earl Shilton Town Council have said that they support the issue around the film on the windows, and what they're proposing here is to put in some coloured film on the inside of the window, and there's a photograph here showing what it might look like. This is from the outside. You can't really see the film from the outside, but I'm not sure what's going to happen when they have lights on inside. You may be able to see the film then. But Chairman, the recommendation is, as per the report, to approve. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lonnick. As Lonnick said, Mrs. Richards is now reasonably content after reading this supplementary report. She did ask to come and speak, but when she had read this, she felt that she was content and she didn't need to. So, with regard to that pedestrian access, I mean, I don't see a problem with widening that. I know in Ashby, at the school there's a Grade 2 listed wall which the access was made wider, and it was done sympathetically. And I mean, this is a much newer couple of pillars than what there was at Ashby. So personally, I don't see a problem with that. But anyway, it's up to members. Does anyone like to? David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The only comment I would like is the windows. Now, looking at a distance, you can't see the colour in the windows. But if the application we had before us was only for new windows and nothing else, would it need planning consent?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That's a very good point. This is a bit tricky because the applicant has put forward the idea of putting in these coloured films on the window. And if he's put it forward as part of his proposal, you're probably entitled to condition it if you so wish. Had they not put in this proposal for film, putting film on the window is not even development, so you couldn't stop them doing it anyway. So it's a bit of an odd thing, Chairman. So in some ways, what I'm advising you, if you have a problem with the film, you wouldn't be able to say you shall not put film on the window, because that wouldn't be unreasonable and you wouldn't be allowed to do it. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, it's just a comment and a suggestion. Both on this item and in the last item, there are a couple more slides about design and also a bit more detail on the actual area. And I just wondered if it would be possible to include those in future applications. It gives us far more detail to go on. Thank you.
Well, we've got a recommendation on page 114. Does any?
Can I move the recommendation then, Chairman?
Okay. Mrs. Taylor.
I've got a few questions, Chair. If I just deal with them individually, it might be easier for me. Just on page 92 under point 8, it's about the area that's going to be demolished, and it's just going to be split off and separated from the main school building, and there are no proposals for the area. Is that just going to be left to rack and ruin, and what's going to happen to that piece of land there?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not aware of what the proposals are, but I assume it's owned by the County Council, and I'm sure the County Council will be looking after it in the way that it normally does. Thank you, Chairman.
And then on page 100, just on point 36, the Highways Authority, where it says additional information is required, is this supplementary report the only other information that we were waiting for? Is there something further that we're waiting for from the Highway Authority?
No, Chairman, there's nothing else waiting, because that's dealt with further in the report, Chairman. If you look at page 105, there's a Highway Authority fuller report. Thank you.
And just one last point, Chair, if I may, on page 106, under point 66, about delivery vehicles and refuse trucks. And would they be able to manoeuvre the site with the cars parked in situ? So is that a concern, that they can't get deliveries in and out of the building?
Thank you, Chairman. It is a little bit of a concern. Oops. I'll just go back to a plan. Yeah. So what they've done is I don't know if you can see it very well here, but they've done a turning sweep here of the lorries. So that's where the bins are going to be placed. So they'll come up, lorries will come up here and they'll turn. So they've done a turning sweep based on a typical refuse vehicle. Now, there was concern, and you see in the report, that, well, you might get a larger vehicle. What happens then? We have nothing from the Highway Authority says you must do that, so that accommodates the Highway Authority issue. But worst things to worst, they're going to have to either reverse in or find a way in. But I think there's satisfaction sufficiently in terms of the sweep there on the type of vehicle that they've used, but you can't guarantee there won't be bigger vehicles coming in, but there's nothing from the Highway Authority that says that's going to be a big issue.
Mr. Crooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to bring that point up as well, because I flagged it up this morning. They could say that they were going to have timed deliveries, but I know from experience that doesn't work. And if you're expecting food deliveries or ESPO come in, you can't afford to turn them away in some cases, because you need the deliveries. So I think there should be adequate movement space for these big lorries, especially with this being now a junior school. I don't know how open it is to the youngsters to get into that area, but with lorries manoeuvring, I know they have a bleeping siren on them nowadays, but you might get residents complaining about that as well, so that's not always a good thing. So I do think that, before, I've not got a problem with passing this, because it's desperately needed in the area, but I do think that before it goes ahead, we do check up on that and make sure there is room for these larger vehicles. It talks about private ones being smaller, but if it goes to an academy, then they'll have what they want. It's not down to the county to organise it. So if that could be looked at. And the other thing I was going to ask is, there's going to be a large part of the site, and I know we don't have any idea of what's going to happen to that, but there are going to be 1,500 houses built in Chiltern in the near future, so I'm just wondering whether we could put a marker on that, for an extension on this school.
Lonnie?
Well, I think the County Council will have to think about that, but that's not for the Planning Committee for this afternoon, Chairman, but I take Mr. Crook's point.
Mr. Volter?
Yes, sir. Page 103, 51, there's a tree mentioned here. Removal of the tree. T2461-C1. What sort of tree is it? Why is that one identified and the rest aren't?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, that's something that's come through from representations, and I don't know why they've identified that tree, but I think it's one on the corner here which needs to be removed to get proper access into the car park. And I think it's part of the 43 trees that are due to go, is my understanding. But I don't know the type of tree offhand. There is a schedule of these trees, but I haven't got it to hand, Chairman.
Did it mention in the report, Chair, there's only 43 trees removed?
Yeah.
There's somewhere, is it?
Somewhere, yeah.
But you are planting a spinny at the back, aren't you?
Chairman, there are about 62 trees along there. 19 are going to stay, 43 are going to go. They're going to be replaced along the frontage, and there's going to be the planting at the back, as shown on the previous diagrams. Yeah.
Okay.
Move the vote, Chairman.
Mrs. Seaton, you wanted to... You know. Okay, well, it's been moved by David. I haven't got a seconder so far. Bill?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favour of the recommendation? That looks you to be unanimous then, Ewan. Well, that's the end of the applications. Any other items the Chairman has decided to take? I haven't got any. And Chairman's announcements. Merry Christmas and thank you very much for coming. I'll see you next year. Thank you.